As many of you know, this past week we had a group of 8 teenagers and 4 adult chaperones go on the St. Simon's Youth Mission Trip to eastern Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains to Paintsville, Kentucky. And as part of this trip, we partnered with a 501c3 company organization called Good Neighbors, Inc. And as part of this organization works to do home restorations and home improvements and construction on houses and on houses of families who are the working class poor in that area. Meaning they have a job, some of the members in the family have a job, but they don't quite qualify for government assistance. And because of this, these families often fall through the cracks. So this organization partners with church organizations and all sorts of other people to provide basic home restoration and construction. For this morning's sermon, we have invited a few of our youth, Lily and Caitlin and Alex, who were on the trip, to share a little bit about their experience and their time working on some of these houses and about the relationships that they built with the staff and also the families. So I would like to invite Lily up to come up and share a little bit about her experience.
Hi, I'm Lily. So I went on this mission trip, and in my group there was Caitlin, Alex, Carl, Allison, and Aaron. And we had a wonderful leader, Les, and he helped us with everything and anything. And so he's a father to 2 beautiful daughters. He has a farm, and on that farm there are 2 goats, cows, and lots of dogs, and a lot of chickens as well. And he's always a happy, upbeat person. He's nice to everybody. He likes to tell a lot of stories. And while he's telling these stories, it's while we're hanging drywall or while we're painting the walls, and he's telling these stories and interrupting, like, can you hand me the drywall, or can you hand me the drill or whatever. And it's a lot of fun to be around him. So one of the life lessons, I guess you could say, he told us was about the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is where when a butterfly flaps its wings, there's a little wave of air that comes off of the wings, and sooner or later it'll keep growing and growing and growing and turn into a monsoon. And Les said he wanted his services to be like this, his volunteer work to be like this. He wanted to do this work and impact other people's lives so that soon they will want to do the same type of service, and it'll just keep growing and growing until everybody's spreading kindness and love and doing the same sort of work that he does. So we came on this trip not only to teach God's love and to spread God's love, but to obtain God's love from others. And Les really helped us with that. I wouldn't have had as great of a trip if it weren't for Les. And I think this connects to the gospel when it says, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. And Christ here is saying, go in peace, I'm not mad at you, be healthy, live a great life. And I feel like Les was sort of, with all the stories he was telling us, he was sending us off with the same sort of message. Go in peace, love others, care for others. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. Like Lily said, I was on their group, but Les was absolutely incredible. He was such a kind person and was just purely and simply happy all the time and found joy in everything he did. We are very fortunate to have had the opportunity to go down to Paintsville for a week and live in the same environment as the people who live there and get a sense of for how things worked and how they were down there. Our group went into this family's house who had really bad plumbing problems, and what we did is we ripped down some ceiling and placed the drywall in, and then mudded the drywall, and then painted the ceiling and the walls and did some trimming and stuff. And Les was our group director and stuff. So while we were in the middle of all the work, like Lily said, he'd be telling us stories that were really entertaining but also really inspirational. But then we'd also go on a lunch break with Les, and he'd be out there sitting next to us and talking to us and making jokes left and right, but also sharing some really, really cool things. He'd make comments about constantly wanting to help others and using that butterfly effect and trying to make a difference in the world. And he also said random things too, like this joke about a mattress that made no sense or things like that. And so we joked around about him making a Twitter account and calling it Les's Lessons because they were good lessons, and it was just awesome to be around. So when we had these lunch breaks, he'd start out with day one, he'd say a little comment about how there were drugs in the area, and he's like, oh, that's not good, that's not good, stay away from that. And then every day, he'd just casually slip in another part of that story, and so it would build and build and build, and every day we'd learn more about him. So on Friday, which is our last day, we found out that, Les speaks so poorly of drugs all the time, but we found out that he used to be a drug addict. And for 10 years of his life, he felt like he had missed out on that part. And so he went and he tried to go to rehab and get help, but he didn't have the money to pay for it, so they turned him away. But he was so determined to keep going. He went to his mom's house for 6 months while he had a wife and 2 kids and stayed there and gave himself rehab, and he recovered on his own. And just in that small little part of that story, we could see Les is trying to, one, teach us a lesson, but also sharing God's love. He wanted to get himself better and was so determined to do so, even though he was turned away, that to show people that if you fall into bad habits, it's okay. He wanted to show his daughters, don't stay away from it, but also if you fall into it, you can get out of it and it's fine. And so he would just always say these stories with a smile too, which is we could just see God's love working through there, and we're so fortunate to spend time with him. And so while he was telling us these other stories, we also found out that last summer, or a year or two before, Les's family was one of the families that Good Neighbors had gone in and helped, and that's how he heard about the organization. He did not have indoor plumbing or running water. So Jason, who works for started Good Neighbors, went in and they put in some water into his house. And every year, someone said this at the potluck, but if Good Neighbors helps you, they ask you to come back and help out a day with another family. And so Les came back, and he came back the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and he just kept coming back because he loved it so much and was so grateful and wanted to give back in the same way that he had received things. And he also always talked, while we were painting these walls and putting in trim, he lives in a very small home, and he doesn't have much, but he acts like he has the world. And everything that we did, he wanted to make sure it was perfect for the family because he wanted to make sure that they had everything they needed. And we just had a lot of fun too. One of the nights, we even went to the local dance thing, and Les was out there dancing. Alex was not, but everyone else was. And it was really cool. Jason and Summer came with us too, and one of the coolest things that I've ever heard, Les, before he started with Good Neighbors, he felt like if he was stuck on the side of the road, he'd have no one to call, and he'd just be stranded because his family was in some bad situations too. But once he found Jason and found Good Neighbors, he's like, yeah, if I'm ever stuck on the side of the road, I think I can call you guys up. And so before we went on the mission trip, Holly said something. She said, mission isn't about going to bring God's kingdom with you. It's about going to see God's kingdom and see God's love in action. And that's exactly what we saw, and we're very fortunate. So thank you.
So the house that we were helping at, the major problem was plumbing. So when Good Neighbors went to check out the house, they said that the smell was so bad they couldn't believe that anybody could live in the house. even Les said it was really bad. That's not good. So he went under the house the week before we got there, and the house didn't smell that bad, but he needed to finish up plumbing, so who else to hold the flashlight and help him out than me. But as we were under the house working on something, he told me this story about kind of why he does what he does. But when he got there, nobody else wanted to take the job, do the bad jobs, I guess. But he wanted to take the job, and he told me a story about when he was a little kid. He didn't have name brand shoes. His family didn't have a lot of money. He didn't have Nike or Adidas. And when he went to gym class, he wasn't allowed to play with the other kids because his shoes would streak up the floors real bad. And one day his stepfather went and bought all his kids name brand shoes, Nike, Adidas, and everything. And Les thought that was super unfair, and I can understand why. But so while he's crying, his mom comes home and asks what the problem is. So she goes to the store with the little money she has and buys him a pair of Nike shoes so he could go play at gym, because she believes that everybody should be equal and have the same thing. And that's kind of how he felt about the family, because the kids, they were too embarrassed to have friends over and stuff like that. So he helped also, fix up their rooms, paint them and all that.
Yeah, give him a round of applause. Caitlin, Lily, and Alex, thank you so much for sharing some of your stories. So our youth group was split into two groups on the work that we did. One where these guys got to work with Les as they worked on the house they were working on, and another group was working on the Jude's house. And we heard some of those folks give some talks about their experiences during the 9 o'clock potluck. Often when we think about mission, we think about it in terms of something that we do, that we go and bring God's love to others. But Christians haven't always thought about mission in that way. In fact, before the 16th century, mission was thought about in relation to and in terms of the nature of the Trinity. So this overflowing and self-giving between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, or the Creator, the Redeemer, the Sustainer. This overflowing and self-giving of life and love and grace. And we could say that the very first missional act was when God said, "Let there be light." When this overflowing and self-giving life and love and grace brought the world and all of creation into being. And when we think of mission in terms of that way, in terms of the nature of the Trinity, we begin to realize that mission isn't something that we do. Mission is something that God does. And when we think of it in that way, we realize that we don't do mission, we participate in God's mission. So the question isn't, what can I do or what should I be doing? The question is, who is God? And what is God's work? And when we think about it in that way, when we ask those questions, and when we contemplate it on a fair amount, and I don't mean to oversimplify things here, but when we really contemplate on it, we begin to realize that God is love. God is that overflowing, self-giving love and life and grace. And we see that in a number of ways. I saw it this past week in the family that we were working for. I saw it in the grandfather, Herschel, who would be on the porch every morning right when we got there, greeting us with a hello and a smile, cracking jokes, and making us feel at home. I saw it in Jessica, the mother of the house where we were working, when she noticed that a few of the adults were dragging one afternoon because we were feeling a little bit tired from all the day's work, and so we're going to go out and get a cup of coffee, and she said, wait, I can make you a pot of coffee right here. And the first thing she did the very next day before she ran off to work was to make us another pot of coffee so we wouldn't have to worry about it. She was thoughtful and in tune to what we were doing. I saw it in the father of the house where we were working, Jason, who a number of years ago, he was a roofer and he suffered a back injury and he could no longer work on roof. but he did the very best he could as we were working to do his own home repairs, to work alongside us when he could, to make things happen, and to work on his own house alongside with us. I thought in the teenage girls of our group who would work to incorporate Madison, the very young girl, about 12, 11, 10 years old, 13 years old, when you all would invite her to come and have lunch with us, when you would invite her to paint alongside of us, to make her feel included, and to let her know that she was loved. This morning's gospel lesson reminds me that Jesus breathed life into us, telling us to wake up. Jesus says in this morning's gospel lesson, Talitha cum, girl, get up. Jesus breathes life into us, giving us life to live into and to participate in the overwhelming, overflowing, self-giving love and life and grace that is God. Amen.